Serious, what is the creepiest confession most disturbing that you have heard from an otherwise normal person? I used to help out at a nursing home. This old Russian lady would relate the same tale over and over. Her husband drank and hit her. It was sad for sure. But one day she leaned over and whispered he was butthole drunk. So I pushed him downstairs. Dead. True Soviet, she is. A friend had told me for years about the dark secret in his past that he can't tell anybody. Eventually he felt comfortable enough to confess. And he really was not exaggerating. When he was young he raped his younger sister. The family knew about it and they all got counseling and stuff at the time. He and his sister are friends now. But frick. I had a friend confess that every time he stayed at my apartment, which was frequently, because we lived in different countries, sometimes he would stay for a month plus at a time. He watched me sleep. I woke with him staring at me. He was literally inches away from my face just staring and I freaked out. He broke down and confessed. My husband was asleep next to me. That was the most creepy for sure. It also ended our friendship. In HS we were hanging out with this kid who was a grade lower than us and he started talking about how he buried a cat up to its head and then ran it over with a lawnmower. I didn't believe that he actually did that. The cat would probably tear the crap out of you, but it was disturbing to think that this was the information he decided to share to impress us. I heard something similar when I was in middle school, I think, or I would hope. This is an urban legend. That my great uncle likes kids. It suddenly made a whole lot more sense that none of his adult daughters were ever married, had a serious LTR and are overweight with self-esteem issues. Every other aspect of his life is perfectly normal and I would have never expected that from him. There was a court case before I was born that was dismissed. My mother never even let me meet him until early this year, because she didn't want to take the chance that he might act indecently towards me. Must be really hard on his daughters. Good on your mother though, to have protected you like that. On my way home from counseling, an elderly lady talked to me about her experience as a nurse in a mental institution. Some of the things she said were horrifying and sad. I think she was glad to get it off her chest. This included patients with schizophrenia who were abandoned by families, people admitted into the wards because of their homosexuality, with some very upsetting consequences, and more. Most involved patients taking their own lives. I sat there and listened, though I'm not sure how much of it actually sunk in until I got home. That sounds like a sad job she has. You're a good person for listening to her. A colleague confessed that she had sex with her brother throughout her childhood and early adolescence. She also told me she despises her brother's wife because she is in love with her brother and is insanely jealous of his life and kids. She has never had a relationship and fears she will never be married or have kids of her own. She doesn't sound very normal. There was this girl in my school who I think was a selective mute. She only talked to a few people, and I was one of them. Then she told me that I'd never be on her hit list. Somebody once told me, the last thing I want to do is hurt you, but it's still on the list. I started seeing a girl about a month ago. She recently told me she was raped when she was 5. Her parents were druggies and had her at a young age, so she stayed with her grandma. But my girl's grandma was a drunk, so she would have her son, my girl's uncle, take care of her. He was about 25 when this happened. As the story goes, he went to go score whatever drugs he was on at the time and left his 5-year-old niece unattended in the car for who knows how long. When he returned, he found her covered in blood. She had reconstructive surgery on her vagina from where the guy tore her open. She confided all of this in me before I went down on her because she has confidence issues because one side looks stretched. Doesn't bother me one bit. She says she still remembers his face and tries not to think about it. The most fricked up thing is when the uncle brought her home. They did nothing. Because he was buying drugs at his dealer's house when it happened. They did nothing to save the fuckhead uncle that brought the 5-year-old around a bunch of junkies. Who knows what actually happened? He could have allowed it to happen for drugs. About 6 months after this happened, he killed himself. OD. My girl says she doesn't like talking about it, so I don't ever bring it up. But I know it has definitely affected her mentally. I just wish there was something I could do to help her forget. TL. DR. My girl got molested when she was 5 while her uncle scored drugs and nothing was done about it. Oh my god. Please help her seek counseling or something. That's horrible. Had an absolutely charming, incredibly smart looking close friend for a few years. It took me about 2 years to find out everything about her life was a lie, even the smarts. She'd read some detailed article on a subject and present ideas as if they were her own, but never knew anything deeper. Pretended to speak many languages by secretly watching a foreign movie with subs on, then translating some cool scenes to us. She made up a story about her father abusing her mom to make excuses for failing her uni exams, lied to people about being a medical student to look smart, and would give them very dangerous advice, lied to her family about being a brilliant medical student, don't know if they believed her, and about many other things. She was an incredibly fun person, but an awful toxic friend. Still, I was afraid she'd lose her mind completely if I revealed her secrets to everyone. So I only quietly told the people she was abusing or potentially putting in danger, so she couldn't do any damage anymore. Several times I tried to talk her into going into therapy, but I stopped. She was in complete denial about me knowing everything. I was so afraid she'd kill herself if she found out what everyone thought of her. One day she just packed her things, said goodbye with a hug and a huge smile on her face, and left for another country to pursue her medical studies. I've kept evidence of all the craziness in case it comes back someday. I'd say that if you genuinely pay attention to people around you, you'll find out many creepy stories like this. Some people see friends come and go, and actually never have any idea of what's going on in their lives. My ex-boyfriend could not handle our breakup. I broke it off with him because of significant issues, drugs, stealing, etc. I finally got out of it. He didn't. He would not give up on me. At first he was desperate at trying to get back with me, following me, waiting in obscure locations for when I walked to my car, and even threatening to kill himself if I didn't see him. I blocked his numbers, changed my email, transferred colleges, moved a state away, and tried to move on with my life. He was in and out of jail for drugs and stealing in addition to concealed weapons charges, which was scary for me knowing all the times when he confronted me alone. It was about 4 or so years later when I received the creepiest phone call. It was him calling to tell me that he was looking for me all this time. The tone of his voice, the horrific laughter. I freaked out. I called my parents and informed them, hey, if I go missing this is who has me. I called campus security and made sure they had his description. He never showed up, but my god, the voice on the other end of the line still brings chills. It scares me to this day that he is out there possibly looking for me. Luckily I've become more aware of precautions to take. Pepper spray, learning self-defense, etc. If I was in another state where obtaining a gun was easier, I would have done so. Unfortunately it's not so easy where I am now. I do however have panic buttons and GPS locators, so if something were to happen, I can be found. I try not to let fear or paranoia run my life. I try to take the best precautions, but I will always have that fear that just around the corner, he will be waiting for me. You should post this to our Let's Not Meet. That is terrifying. Had a good friend of mine tell his crush at a party that he just wanted to cut her ears off and take them with him. He's a great guy, married, and just had his first child, with someone completely different. That girl was gone. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Most disturbing was when a friend confided in me that she had been sexually assaulted. It was quite disturbing because I used to think of sexual violence as an abstract concept that wasn't pervasive enough to affect my world. But it is. Disabused me of many inaccurate notions. The nature of sexual violence makes it more likely to be unreported. I've helped a few friends out with things like this, and reporting it to the police was the last thing on their minds. The desire to feel safe and unashamed was a much more pressing concern, and the last thing they'd want to do was talk about it with strangers over and over. I work with a Polish dude who barely speaks English. He's a lovable 40-something dude who just drinks vodka and laughs infectiously all day long. A textbook carefree scamp. Every couple of months everyone from work heads to a bar that hook us up with half-price drinks for that particular night. It's pretty sweet. So anyway, this Polish dude and I were at the end of a long 10-person bench laughing about nothing and drinking ice cold cruiser after ice cold cruiser. It was great. Eventually we Somehow, got onto the topic of what he did before he came to England. After a few brews his English became even more scattered, but he did try, bless him. So he says he was in the army and so on and so forth. After which he said I shoot 7 men dead. Now that might not seem too heavy for you, but it blew me away. He was on the front lines during the Kosovan War. From what I could gather, I couldn't, and didn't want to get too much more out of him due to the language barrier. Also, some gnarly, illegal crap happened during that war, which I don't think I could bear to know about. Keep smiling, Pete. Dang, I know a 40-something Kosovan dude who basically told me the same story, but completely casually. Then he said he never wants to hold a weapon again in his life. Told me that he used to go on forums and boards dedicated to people struggle with depression, and he'd PM the ones who were feeling suicidal with instructions on how to go about killing themselves, and give encouragement to do so. I've never lost so much respect for a person within the duration of a couple minutes. This might be the most disturbing thing in this thread. I gave 4 virgins chlamydia. Instantly thought less of this person. What a freaking butthole. My friend who is this grade A student goes over to all these different girls' houses, not to have sex or anything, just to steal their dirty underwear while they're in the bathroom or they're elsewhere. He has a full box, which includes a pair of my sister's underwear which he admitted to stealing, in his pantry. I'm surprised no one has noticed in his house, but to this day, I'm the only one who knows. Well, now the whole of Reddit knows. Frick you, Scott, you panty stealing frick. When I was in 4th grade, one of my friends broke down in tears and told me that he had murdered someone, and that's why he moved away from CA. As a very gullible 9-year-old, I walked around with the burden of knowing a murderer for about a week. A friend of mine confessed that he was molested as a child. His parents are part of this cult that believes their leader can talk to God. The cult is decent sized. There are about a few hundred members when I researched it. My friend said that there was a man from the church who would offer to babysit him and his little brother. The babysitter would offer them money to take off their clothes, get their pictures taken and do sexual favors. The church gathers a block from my house. I thought this building was a temple or a mosque, but in reality it's some sort of cult compound. Some of the members are actually part of the local police too. If I wasn't always drunk I would probably be scared. A really shy and timid friend told me her idea of a perfect date was fricking while watching the movie Antichrist. I told her I love that movie. Make sure she doesn't have access to scissors when if you frick her. In fact, make sure there's no objects at all she might be able to use to say, knock you out, hammer a ball and chain through your leg, crush your balls and then chop her own clit off with. I was having a few beers with another, much older, teacher. He told me he used to sleep with 13-year-olds when he was 30 and living in his hometown. That would definitely be when my father drove 2,000 miles to my home to sit down and for the first time be brazenly open about how he was raped by his cousin when he was 5 or so 12 and how he has been a pedophile since. But it's okay, because he was raped as a child and, hey, turned out okay. This comes out of the woodwork as he was preparing for trial because he volunteered his computer to the police and it had kiddie pee on it. His trial is in March. I had an art teacher in about 3rd grade who was really cool, or at least I thought so. At some point, she came up to me and said, "I love your red hair. I just want to chop it all off when you're asleep and glue it to my head." It's one of my sharpest childhood memories because I remember going afterward. Thanks and laughing really nervously. All art teachers are weird, in some way. My friend said he was left alone with the body of his dead cousin during the funeral. Everyone got personal time to say goodbye or whatever and he had sex with it. He cried when he told us. I have no other information. An 18-year-old I had just met got crazy drunk, on the verge of alcohol poisoning, and said he was worried about a child pee case he was caught up in. I didn't want to know anymore and made sure he didn't die, then got the frick out. Back in my early 20s, I'm 41 now, I had a small group of close friends. We'd get together after work and on weekends to smoke weed or drink. Sometimes someone would bring someone new. One new guy I'll call Scott started to hang out frequently on weekends. Seemed normal but mostly quiet. One night Scott gets stoned and tells the group how a neighbor abducted him and his younger brother at knife point from the woods behind their house and forced him to perform sex acts with his younger brother while the neighbor watched. If they balked or refused, the guy would cut them or poke them with the knife. Scott's telling this story like he's no longer aware we are even in the room. He's looking through us. He tells us that the guy lets them go after like 8 hours. When Scott gets home, his little brother runs and hides, so he goes and tells his mom what happened, but she doesn't believe him and claims he's making it up to excuse the two boys for being late. The next day, Scott's little brother still wouldn't come out of his room, so Scott tells his dad, then takes his dad and shows him his little brother's bleeding rectum. Scott tells us everything goes to heck from there. The cops are called. The story has to be told over and over again. Scott's parents' marriage explodes due to his mom not believing the story or even informing the father about it. Scott's mom tells everybody remotely close to the family the details, which embarrasses and humiliates both the boys. Scott says he tried to block it out, but his little brother is tormented by it despite tons of therapy. Parents divorce and Scott's dad has custody. Scott continues telling us how his brother blames him for everything for years. The little brother was sodomized by Scott multiple times during the ordeal. So a couple years go by and Scott's little brother is guilting him the whole time. The little brother decides the only way he can forgive Scott and get past it is if he gets to do to Scott what Scott was forced to do to him. Guilts Scott into it through a lot of blame and then threats of suicide. Afterwards, the younger brother tells the parents and immediate family what he did to Scott. Then the brother decides he can't live with what he did with Scott. Brother writes in his suicide note that he can't understand how Scott could live with himself after what Scott did to him because he can't live with what he did to Scott. The younger brother hanged himself. Scott tells this whole story to us, then he curls up in fetal position and starts bawling his eyes out. Everybody is just stunned. We did bong hits till Scott cried himself out, then the dude who first brought Scott in takes him home. We never see Scott again. Oh man, poor guy. Was sitting in a room full of people getting high when one of them starts describing a love affair he had on his uncle's farm. TL. Doctor, he fricked a horse. I just cannot understand why on earth someone would even remotely want to do that. I understand curiosity. Of course, I wonder what it'd be like to kill someone. But the thought and action are so far away. I don't know what brings someone to put their dong inside an animal. When I was in my mid-20s, a serious girlfriend of mine drunkenly confessed that she was willingly gangbanged by 2 of her brothers and their friends when she was in her early teens, and that it wasn't a big deal. Suddenly, a lot of her past behavior in our relationship started to make sense, and I broke up with her shortly after because I started worrying that she might actually be dangerous. As in, kill your spouse for the insurance money dangerous. It's weird how people have a hard time recognizing someone's serious mental health issues when that person is very physically attractive. My ex told me he killed a horse. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't dead or anything. He just saw a horse and decided I should kill this horse. He gutted it and everything and he liked it. Out of nowhere, my ma tells me my dad drunkenly confessed that he and his cousin, whom my mom later dated and had a kid with, picked up a hitchhiker out near the beach in the early 90s. They were intoxicated and one thing led to another and they ended up killing the guy and burying him in a remote location in some sand dunes. She assumed he was trying to scare her into staying with him since they were going through a breakup, and she shrugged it off as machismo bulls. So the story goes. Years later, a story comes up on the news. They are asking for information about remains found buried in a sand dune. She's not really paying attention until they start describing this large belt buckle that may help identify the man. She flips the frick out because my dad had bragged about taking the guy's belt off, which had a huge Texas style buckle, and beating him with it, making fun of the buckle and stuff. Next day, the cousin calls and tells her he or his buddies would not hesitate to kill us if she breathes the word. Anyways, she always felt really guilty about not turning them in, but after losing my sister, she died very young. She couldn't fathom losing me as well. The rest is history. They are free dudes. A guy I was dating in high school told me that he had sex with his younger, 7th grade, maybe, brother because he was just so addicted to masturbation and he could never be the parent to a son and daughter because his son would certainly rape the daughter. It took years for me to completely realize the level of fricked up that was. When I was 14 at a sleepover with my best friend, she told me that she used to live next door to a pedophile. He touched up and raped 2/3 of his kids, one boy and one girl, who then told the police, who didn't believe them, especially because the mum told them they were making it up for attention. He then went to do charity work in Africa and may have assaulted them, we don't know. Then he came back to England and then assaulted one of his grandkids. This little girl told her mum, who was assaulted by him too. The little girl, her mum and her brother, the 3 victims of this man, 2 of them now adults, then went to the police. This time the police realized their past mistake and arrested the man, but he died before he could be prosecuted. I knew this previously, but she told me, you have those random snippets of childhood memories and you don't know whether they're real, imagination or dream. I nodded. Well, I have one of these about going up and down the road on my scooter when I was about 5 and him sitting in his garage. He called me into the garage and shut the door. Then about an hour later I left. That's all I remember, but a couple of years ago I was trying to put my first tampon in and there wasn't that skin stuff that's supposed to be there. The barrier. And I've never cycled, rode a horse or done gymnastics. She looked really distressed when she said this. When I was 3, my uncle caught me taking poop out of the toilet with my hands and eating it. This was really only disturbing because of who was involved. The person who told me this gem was my dental hygienist, while she had her hands in my mouth. If she was older than 4 when she told you, you're probably fine. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.